You are listening to the Toxic Mold Podcast with Steve Worsley, the toxic mold expert and your number one source for mold consulting and mitigation in the USA. Let's dive into a brand new episode.
Before we get started on this episode, here's a not-so-short disclaimer. While all attempts have been made to verify the content provided in this podcast, neither the podcaster nor the producers assume any responsibility for errors, omissions, or alternative interpretations of the issues discussed here. All information stated in this podcast is the opinion of Steve Worsley. Steve Worsley is a mold specialist with over 25 years of experience in the construction and mold industry. The Toxic Mold Podcast is for information sharing purposes only. The views expressed are those of the podcaster and his alone. These views should not be taken as expert instruction or commands. While there may be references to medical conditions and symptoms, all podcast episodes are the opinion of Steve Worsley, and any medical questions or concerns shall be addressed with the appropriate licensed medical professional or professionals. As the podcaster refers to different mold types, please be aware that Steve Worsley is not a microbiologist, and questions concerning mold specifics should be answered by the appropriate professional. Steve isn't, nor does he offer any legal advice. For any legal advice, you must speak to a lawyer. The listener is 100% responsible for his or her own actions. You can check out Steve's books on Amazon. Just go to Amazon and search for author Steve Worsley. You can also take Steve's mold education courses, such as Mold 101 and the Mycotoxin Prevention Kit, by going to cnccontractorservices.com. Again, check out his mold education courses at cnccontractorservices.com. Now, let's get to the episode.
Hello, you're listening to the Toxic Mold Podcast with myself, Steve Worsley, and we have my wife, Cassandra. One of these days, I'm going to get a guest.
Yes, another functional medicine guest would be great.
Yeah, our listeners are probably tired of hearing this from me, but I haven't tried hard enough to get some guests. I thought I had somebody, she's a ND, right?
MP?
Oh, MP. And then she had some stuff going on in life, so she wasn't quite ready. Then I talked to another guy that's, he has a mold dog, which most of the time I don't bring on guests that are in the same field as me. But I want to bring him on because his family went through some mold issues, and I get lots of questions about mold dogs, so at some point I'll do that. But I've got to try a little bit harder because, I don't get enough done. I only have 500 things I'm trying to do, but we'll get a guest on.
You know what I'd really love? I'd love for you to bring on a guest who will debate you on the Ermi and Hurts Me. That'd be a very exciting episode. Somebody who's for Ermi and Hurts Me, and then you could debate them. I think that'd be great.
Really?
I think it'd be exciting.
Well, I hate to let you...
Or even a few people, like you could bring 2 or 3, a panel show, 2 or 3 who are for Ermi and Hurts Me, 2 or 3 who are against, and you sort of facilitate the debate.
But it would be funny, and this is what I was going to tell our listeners, it would probably be the people for the Ermi would be like medical professionals, and those against it are the actual mold people.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. That'd be exciting.
Right, but I guess for me, what would be the point? That would be like the medical professionals wanting to debate me on the best type of...
Well, I think it's important for our listeners to really hear different points of view at the same time.
Right.
Because I think there are a lot of people who are out there really saying Ermi and Hurts Me is the only way to go. That's a red flag. You should always question anyone who says that something is the only way to go. But then you never hear the other side saying this is why we don't think that's the... Because one side isn't saying that our way is the only way. They're saying we just know that the Ermi and the Hurts Me alone is not the only way.
Right.
So I'd love to hear both sides so that our listeners really hear both sides at the same time and can make their own conclusions about what they think.
Yeah, I'm a pretty diplomatic person. I'm not sure.
But that's why I think you wouldn't be on either side. You would just be the interviewer facilitating the debate, and you would
I probably couldn't help myself.
No, I don't think you could help yourself. But it'd be a good episode.
Right. And what's interesting, I was talking about it, because this is what today's episode is about. Let's talk about the health concerns with mold exposure. And that's probably what made you think of
Yeah.
the ones that are for the ERMI. And I want to be clear with our listeners. I'm not saying the ERMI and the Hurts Me Too are pointless. Every test has its reason. I just think too much validity is put behind the ERMI.
Well, I think people who are for the ERMI and the Hurts Me are too myopic in their perspective. Health is holistic.
Yeah.
That means one thing is never the silver
Yeah.
bullet when it comes to somebody's health. That's why functional medicine is so important, because functional medicine focuses on the whole system of the human
Right.
body, not one.
Yeah. Our listeners should know well enough with me. I'm not you should only do an EMA test or an air test. Like, I understand every test has its purpose.
Correct.
But it brings up the health side of things, which is it's a very interesting subject. Obviously, I've had Dr. Diane, Dr. Fox. I just started following another doctor, and I can't remember his name.
Dr. Josh Axe, who's
Yes.
amazing.
And
there's a Dr. Jill, who's a mold doctor, too.
Yeah.
Krista?
Jill Krista.
Yeah.
And I think there's Jill Callahan.
There's quite a few.
There's tons. There's Dr. Dempsey that I really like. She's doing it's almost like it looks like a blood transfusion kind of thing, but it's a blood cleaning thing that I've seen on her page. I need to reach out to these people, and I'm sure if I bug them long enough, I'll probably get one of them. But as I just said earlier, it's a lot of work. But let's explain to our listeners on the health side. So when you hear mold sickness for you, what do you think?
Well, I think a number of things. It could be a mold allergy. It could be a mold inflammation reaction. It could be an immune system inflammation reaction. But in general, mold sickness to me means that the immune system is inflamed and is responding to the toxigenic impact of the mold.
Okay. You covered a lot there, and you ended with toxigenic, but then you started with mold allergy. So it brings up something I want to explain to our listeners. We classify mold in 3 different categories, and I'll buy you a sweet burrito if you can get it right. Do you know what all 3 categories are?
I'm already getting a sweet burrito, so I need something more than that. Allergenic, pathogenic, toxigenic.
Good job.
And I learned that because it's in your book, The Mold Epidemic, which is available on Amazon.
Yes. So for our listeners, allergenic, obviously pretty basic, some people will react to it, some won't. For the most part, it's an allergenic mold, so you can control it with antihistamines. Fair enough?
Yes.
Pathogenic? What does that mean?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. It's a pathogen. It has a
and
way
what do pathogens create?
They create
an infection.
An infection of sorts. And an infection can be viral or bacterial. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Pathogenic molds, they obviously can create an infection. Sometimes can be controlled with antibiotics, which sounds counterintuitive, but it is. Athlete's foot, yeast infections, gut issues, gut imbalances pretty much. So pathogenic is a little more serious. Then the third one, which is toxigenic, means the mold can produce mycotoxins.
Yes, which then can poison you, which then activates your immune system.
Right. In your opinion, obviously you're not, lots of the health side of it, but you're not a medical doctor. Do you believe that an allergenic mold exposure would be the same as a toxigenic mold exposure?
It is not the same, but the impact differs from individual to individual because allergenic can be very detrimental to a person, depending on their pre-existing conditions.
They can go into anaphylactic shock.
100%. Like people with asthma, people with routine bronchitis, people who just are prone to respiratory illnesses or brain fog. Allergenic might make them really sick.
So it's funny how you said that because, obviously our listeners know these are not scripted podcasts. I want our listeners to understand that the way I explained an allergenic mold might have sounded like I was downplaying it. Now, I want to be clear. They can have tons of issues with it. I don't want our listeners to also think that because it's only an allergenic mold, it's not a big deal.
Correct.
Now, it can and can't be, and every situation's different. Like, if we only find an allergenic mold, meaning it's a non-toxigenic mold, there's no mycotoxins being created, the mold remediation and the treatment process is going to be way different than a toxigenic mold.
Correct.
But on the other hand, so to explain that to our listeners, if there is no toxigenic molds in the home, we're not necessarily that concerned with the mycotoxins being spread throughout the home. Now, in my opinion, I'm going to treat the home the same way, but I'm not going to put as much emphasis on an SPC, which is a small particle cleaning, if we don't have any toxigenic molds in the home.
Correct.
That's kind of a rabbit hole that I'm not even going to really go down, because for the most part, it's almost impossible to never have a toxigenic mold in the home. But you brought up something that's very important. I asked you what mold sickness is. You gave a list of things. It's a very broad term. So when someone says I'm experiencing mold sickness, then I'm like, okay, is it minor? Is it major? That's a matter of opinion. And then you brought up something else, that everyone reacts differently.
Correct. And the precursors to somebody getting mold sickness differs from person to person. There's a chicken and egg thing where did the Lyme cause the mold, or did the mold cause the Lyme? Did the autoimmune disorder open the way for the mold toxicity, or did the mold toxicity decrease the... See, so like there's a chicken and egg conversation anytime we talk about mold sickness.
Yeah, and so that brings up something that I want to address, and I'm sure you've heard some of these terms. But when I'm talking and consulting with a client, there are things I'm going to ask, even though I'm not a doctor, because I want to know on the medical side what we're dealing with. One of the most common things, you just mentioned it, that my clients have, they have Lyme disease, which it's tick-borne, but I can't remember which one of the doctors I've interviewed has said that we're maybe finding out that you don't have to be, I don't know if is it called bitten by a tick?
Yeah, you don't have to now.
Because a tick doesn't really bite you; it embeds itself, right?
Because there are lots of people now who are getting Lymes who were never exposed to ticks.
Yeah. So and that's what I was going to say is, so that's a scientific thing that we're not going to go down that road with. But most of them have Lyme. It's very rare that they don't. Most of them have CIRS, which is CIRS. You know what that means, right?
Yes.
Chronic inflammatory response syndrome. That's something that's how it's diagnosed. You'd have to talk to a doctor. Most of my clients have that too. When it comes to kids, they have PANS or PANDAS. And then I didn't mention MCAS, which is mast cell activation syndrome, which I believe is mostly in women.
Well, and all of these things are relatively new in terms of their popularity among the number of people who have them. These were not massively big things like CIRS 30 years ago in people.
Right.
So something in the last 30 years, or many things in the last 30 years, have changed about the way we live, where we live, and our overall immune system health.
Yeah, and this isn't a question I'm asking you, but I would ask a doctor. Like, there's a test for Lyme disease. I think it's called Bordetella, or I don't know. I don't spend my time focusing on that. But I am curious, like, is there a certain blood test for CIRS or MCAS or PANS or PANDAS? I don't think there is. I think they go off a list of symptoms.
Yes, and there's also, and I can't remember the test, but there are also tests to see whether your body has like C-reactive protein. For example, they're looking at protein levels, blood levels, white T cell count.
Which is like what Josh Axe does.
Exactly. Because if you're overactive, if your immune system's overactivated, some of those levels will tell you that it is.
Gotcha.
Cortisol spikes will typically tell you have an immune problem.
Oh, okay. The next subject it brings up is like, what's the symptoms of mold? Like when my clients ask me that, I give them a list that we're going to kind of go over, but I tell them there's so many symptoms, like they all can overlap as far as, is this because of mold or is it not? Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, because so many of the symptoms could be so many diseases.
Right.
And so you have to really figure out, is this really mold? Is this really depression? Is this really brain fog due to something else? Or is the mold toxicity the thing that caused all these other stuffy nose, runny nose, asthmatic things?
Yeah, like, so is the chronic fatigue because of mold exposure? Is the brain fog because of mold exposure?
Correct.
Is it because of AS? Like, it gets really complicated. So to just kind of go over the list, I'm sure most of our listeners would already know this, but like the minor symptoms, and when I say minor, these are things that are easily treated. You could have things like a headache. Well, I guess there's a big thing now about Tylenol, isn't there?
Tylenol and Motrin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we're not going to get down
we won't go down that rabbit hole. It's too new.
Yeah.
The research isn't new, but the ideas are new. So you go look for yourself.
Yeah. It's just, we don't talk politics or What do I always say? It's the Sammy Kershaw song, Politics, Religion, and Her.
Yes, exactly. All we talk here is mold.
Exactly. So the symptoms can be fairly minor, like headaches, a runny nose, stuffy nose, something that goes away fairly quickly, can be controlled easily with antihistamines. But the major symptoms, that's where we get into what I would call more of mold toxicity. So mycotoxins, you have the anxiety, chronic fatigue, brain fog, depression, anxiety, inflammation in your joints, and they've even said it can lead to cancer.
And it certainly causes infertility.
Right. Which, once again, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole, but I don't know what we just saw the other day, but birth rates are just terrible in especially other countries and in America.
Correct. And I guess that's one point to keep in mind with health concerns with mold exposure. Typically in mold, you worry most about tiny babies, like 1-year-old, 6-month-old, and you worry about old people because both those populations are prone to have immune issue things that affect them. But then sometimes we think, well, my 7-year-old is fine and my 8-year-old, because they'll just bounce back. But for little girls, if mold affects fertility, and you are exposing them to toxic mold that young, what do you think is going to happen as they hit puberty and beyond?
Right.
You want to be very proactive
Right.
about dealing with mold, especially when you have daughters.
Yeah, and it brings up a subject we've talked about quite often, and one of the most common things I see with my clients is only 1 or 2 people in the household are experiencing mold sickness. And as you said, it's if you think about the bucket that's filling up, and Dr. Fox, she says this, she's like, well, typically it's not the Lyme disease that shows itself. It shows itself after you've been exposed to mold. It's because the bucket was full and then it overflowed. Like you said, with young girls and all of us, as we age, we go through different things. But young girls, I mean, for our listeners, if you have young girls, really pay attention to that stuff.
Well, and I think sometimes it's very easy. Typically, your presenting clients tend to be women. And so typically the husbands or the spouses are a bit more, oh, this is fine.
Yeah.
Oh, this is fine. Yeah, but men also operate on different cycles. Men operate on 24-hour cycles. Women operate on 28-day cycles. So we absorb much more than men do. And so if you're a father listening to this or a husband listening to this, your daughters are being affected. So even if you think it's not a big deal for you, you need to think about the future of your own children and say, this is actually going to be a very big deal for her.
Yep. Our listeners know this. Like, I'm very clear. Like, I don't want to use fear tactics or anything like that. So the next question that gets brought up is when I have a client that comes to me and they say, yeah, it's mold and that's what's making me sick. What's the next thing I tell them to do? Medical testing.
Well, absolutely. Because you're not going to be, you
can't argue that.
No, you're not
an
alarmist. You're not an alarmist.
Right.
But at the same time, there's an order of operations that you always work with clients on making sure they follow.
Exactly. For our listeners, you just mentioned it, like the order of operations. One of the important things is we want to see medically what your blood work or urine, whatever testing you do, is telling us. And then we want to do the same thing on the home side, meaning mycotoxin testing on the body, mycotoxin testing in the home.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that important?
Because you want to really get conclusive about where the mold exposure is actually happening.
Exactly. Is it happening at your mom's? Is it happening at school?
And it may not be
work?
At home.
Exactly. So for our listeners, that's really important. But going back to the medical side, I've interviewed 2 doctors, have interviewed them 2 times. So there's 4 episodes about it. But both Dr. Fox and Dr. Diane, they recommend the urine testing from Real-Time Lab or Vibrant Wellness. There are other labs that you can use. People, and we'll talk about the blood testing with my myco lab. But people say, well, if it's coming out in your urine, that's not an accurate way. Well, I view it this way, and I learned this from Dr. Fox or Dr. Diane. Well, if it's coming out in your urine, it was still in your body.
Well, but I think that's where we get back to the original thing we were talking about. There is no one true test. I think the reason why it's important to run multiple tests, just like having, AirGuard as an IAQ monitor and Luft, having both of them. The reason why it's important to do multiple tests is so you have multiple baselines to work with, and you can take the results of all the different tests and a doctor can assess from there.
Yeah, like for us, for quality control, when I got certified as a radon tester, we would have to do yearly quality assurance spike tests. more or less, we had to put two machines side by side that were both calibrated properly and see if they had the same results. If one was totally different than the other, it was telling us something.
Exactly.
You know, that's the interesting part with the medical side. And our listeners know this. They want to hear, I'm sure, more about the medical side, but I'm not a medical professional, so that's...
Well, and the medical professionals cannot help you if you're not doing your due diligence and your order of operations, which begins with documenting your mold symptoms. So if it's anxiety, depression, runny nose, brain fog, dizziness, eye problems, rashes on the skin, whoever is experiencing problems in your home, you've got to start documenting them, because even doing testing, a doctor is going to say to you, well, when did that happen and what happened and how?
Yeah.
So you've got to have documentation.
Yeah, and we have in one of the courses, I can't remember, you've had me create so many that I can't remember.
I think it's Mold 101.
But it has the different checklists for the medical stuff.
Yes.
It's pretty extensive.
I'm pretty sure it's Mold 101.
Okay.
It might be mold sickness. But, you know, again, we deliver these educational online programs so you have access to the resources you need to document.
But I want to jump back to the medical testing, because there is a test, and I've seen, you know, some of his, not podcasts, but he has some short videos, but it's Dr. Campbell from mycotoxin. That's a blood test.
Okay.
And he is very knowledgeable. Once again, doctors or differing opinions, kind of like the Ermi versus Emma. He does that, and it's through mycotoxin. For our listeners, just to be clear, like there's a urine test and there's blood testing.
And I think you have to determine what what health practitioners you're actually going to need, because you can go to an MD and you can do that kind of testing that Dr. Fox and that person does. But then you can also go see people like Heather, the health coach, who you also interviewed on the podcast, who can get you the Dutch test or other tests where you can learn about your genetic predisposition to mold and other things.
Yeah, and she does like muscle testing. And she actually, her and the other lady, and I can't think of her name, I think it's McGrath, is Bobby McGrath? Hopefully, Heather, if you're listening, I apologize. But they actually have a course that they're offering.
Correct.
And they go through the whole, and Heather has certifications, so does her business partner, but they have, you know, detox pathways, different types of things you should take. Like, you know, you have to get rid of all the heavy metals in your body. And it brings up something for our listeners. The way you detox it's the same as testing. There's not a cure-all thing you do.
No.
You don't just take glutathione and it's going to clear you.
No.
Like there's activated charcoal. There's a ton of different things. And each person, and I believe each mycotoxin, is treated differently.
And that is why in one of your online programs, you talk about needing a mold support team and putting together a mold support team. So if we're talking about health concerns and mold exposure, what are your recommendations of next steps people can take if they're concerned?
On the medical side?
Yeah.
They, like you said, they need to get their medical team together. Preferably, you know, it's a holistic kind of doctor, naturopath. I mean, Dr. Fox is an MD. I'm not saying, you know, because of the MD doesn't make mean they're qualified, but get a mold literate professional.
Okay.
If I go to my normal GP and I talk to him about mold, and he has no clue what I'm talking about, I'm going to the wrong doctor.
Well, and that brings up a really good point. If you know more about mold than your doctor does, that's not the right doctor.
Exactly. And once again, it doesn't mean they don't know what they're talking about, but when it comes to mold, they don't.
Yep. So what's your call to action for people?
Just you mentioned it earlier, don't ignore somebody if it's only one person in your home that's sick. And I deal with that all the time. And most of the time it is a female. And it's sometimes they're teenagers, sometimes they're adults. But females typically, from what I see, now, of course, I have male clients, plenty of them, that are dealing with mold sickness, but most of the time it is females.
It is. And you have to look at the statistics. Most autoimmune disorders are happening to women.
Yeah.
Women carry babies for 40 weeks. They are holding all the toxins, absorbing all the things, and then bringing life into the world. There is something to be said that for the fact that they can hold toxins much longer than men can.
Well, and you're saying what we all know. Men just won't admit it, but women are way tougher than men are.
Yes, they are.
But for all our listeners, like, just that's one of the most common things I see is you ignore somebody in the home, and then it turns into something major. I don't think it's ever too late, but you've got to get the proper medical professional involved and the proper IEP.
Correct.
Like myself. We have, I already mentioned it, we have different courses, but I offer consultations, different types, different lengths, different appointments, all sorts of stuff. But you can go to our website. I'll put a link in the description of the podcast. But if you're not sure what to do next, just set up a consultation and we'll get to the bottom of it.
Absolutely. CNCcontractorservices.com.
All right. Thank you for all you listeners. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If mold in your home has you up at night, wondering if your house is making you sick, it is time for a plan. With a mold consult, in other words, the mold environment assessment and evaluation plan from CNC Contractor Services, you will get a 90-minute strategy call with Steve Worsley, who will review your home environment, answer your toughest questions, and create personalized mold recommendations and next steps just for you. Don't let mold concerns take over. Take control. Visit cnccontractorservices.com to schedule your mold consult today so you can breathe easier in your home tomorrow.